If I don't record, please always remind me to record. I'm horrible at pressing the button. We've got a couple of recordings that start in the middle because of me. So full responsibility there. And then, yeah, so we're a global group. We're going to stay virtual even post-COVID. We have no plans to go in person just because architects are everywhere. We don't want you to have to feel like you've got to start your own group in each place. More than welcome to, but we're going to stay virtual so everyone can join. We've tried a few different times, a few different time zones, and best turnout seems to be right around 9 a.m. Pacific. We've actually had a better turnout earlier, but it's a bit too early for me on a Saturday. So 9 a.m. Pacific it is. And then I've been working with Salesforce for about 15 years now. Started at the mothership and then started working for a customer, entered the partner sphere just a couple of years later when my org of 154 users and 154 sysadmins on my very first day, that later on my second day had only 2 admins, made me the most hated person in the world. But I stayed there for a couple of years, got them up and running, and then they just wouldn't upgrade. So at least we got off Lotus Notes. I was so excited. We got into marketing, we got into leads, and no more opportunities that we kept updating that were closing 5 years ago. So yeah, it was fantastic. And then yeah, Kool-Aid, man, I just loved it. When I started Salesforce, I loved it. When I became a customer, I loved it. Then I entered the partner sphere, started at an ISV partner, working with DocuSign. I was one of their first 30 employees. We went global while I was there. Then I went into the consulting world. I'm super excited for the FlowFest event. So I'm a big fan of Flow. Flow is what taught me that I was a horrible developer back when I was a consultant, and that I should stop touching code because it was a horrible idea. And once I had Flow, of course, I started with clicks before code, always, not just with automation. Cactus Force recordings, we can get that link up for where they are going to be. I know not all of them are up for everybody yet, unless you were registered, but they're in process. We'll get that up for you. And then after that, I entered the consulting world. I've been in consulting since. Vast majority of my time consulting I have spent at startups and boutique shops, working on multi-million-dollar projects with about 5 people, where you had to be every single role in the world. And then now, just this past year, I joined Accenture. I'm still in a bit of a culture shock, and working on multi-million-dollar projects, but you have a whole team. Like, it's just mind-blowing to me what it's like to have a team for support. It seems you can get so much more done when you are not everything to everyone, when you're not your own dev, you're not your own consultant, you're not the architect and the technical project manager. One advantage, though, of having worked at those smaller shops and having worked at so many small places is I had to be everything. I had to put documentation together. I learned the value of documenting as I go, which has given me a little bit of a heads up when it comes to getting ready. I'm hoping to take my CTA exam within the next 6 months here. And one of the big reasons why I switched over to Accenture was for their CTA program. They've got a whole study group that you can get involved in once you get out of your pyramid and you've completed that, and you can start working with either CTAs or people on the road to CTA in a combination to help you prep for your exam. Like I said, it was a big reason why I switched over, and it's been very beneficial to be able to work with other people, see how they document things, how they put things together. One last shameless plug. I also run Seattle Wit. In addition to this group, I also have a blog and a podcast. The podcast is for architects and devs in the Salesforce ecosystem. Please feel free to check out system.debug. And Paul is joining me as a co-host on the show, along with Nathan Pepper. So be great to have some of you guys attend. We meet at 4:30 every other Tuesday, and that's 4:30 Pacific. So yeah, back to what I said about documentation. Okay. Documentation, I mean, at first, when you're documenting, if you're just an architect, like right now, my role is only to make my architectural documents, system diagrams, system landscape, being able to come up with that overall end-to-end, and then whatever I'm working on piece by piece in ERD. However, before, when I had to be everything to everybody, I did our integration diagrams, I did our process diagrams, I did the role hierarchy, I did the security matrix, and you name it, chances are it fell under my responsibility. And in doing so, there are only so many different ways you can make a security matrix. There are only so many different ways you can create some of these foundational items to get you started. So one thing I did is I templatized. And when you've got 5 people working on a project that you're going to be tight on anyway, having a template to kickstart you helps so much. And especially if your group is, the group for your team is a group of people that, sees that same document over and over, you all just start to work faster on it. You all work better on it. And then you all know where everything goes. We've all had the situations though, where on the project side, clients give us stuff and we have to do things the client's way. Totally normal and acceptable. When I was a client, I had things that I wanted done my way. So, but in prepping for my CTA exam, one thing I've noticed is having my templates and having them set up in a pattern has helped me come up with how I want to present on them. And the more I use them, the more I am able to repetitively go through and say, no matter what the scenario is, this is the way I do this every time.
The question,
so,
Megan.
Yeah.
So, for, and maybe first poll, the architecture diagrams, do you give everybody access? Do you give multiple people access? Do you control access to gate changes to environments?
That is a great question, Paul. I love it. And it actually comes up on a lot of projects. What should we be doing? Who should have access? There are documents that only have access to one person. When one person has access, you have a gatekeeper. People can meet with them. Now, depending on the size of the project, you may need 2 people. But there should be somebody that owns that document. That person that owns the document, I have as the person that updates the document. That way, when you go through, when you go back to your document, it hasn't been changed. So you're sitting there going, wait, I thought this connected to that, or I thought this was here. When did all this change? Then when it comes to, I got to call.
I just finished setting that up. Meetings to review big picture documents and trying to be a little bit of a benevolent dictator and say, okay, you're welcome to have other documents, but if they ever disagree with this one, we're throwing yours in the trash. You have to come together. There will be a challenge, and there will be hell to pay if the main project document, the top level, the level 0, and the level 1 ever get out of date. Everybody else is free to create documents at level 2, but they need to regularly review and make sure that they've had no changes come back up. And I wanted to open up the can of worms, Megan, if you're okay with people adding comments or asking or talking along your talk stream.
Exactly what I said in the beginning is please jump in. Yeah, 100%, please jump in. And I'm actually opening up a slide here so we can start adding some of this great stuff. And then I've got a bunch of tabs open with documents I wanted to share as we get to each one of those for talking through the exam stuff. So let me quick make a header, then I'll switch back over to the Zoom screen. So let's do call updates. All right, do a type.
And we've leveled off with people joining. I don't know if we're full or you want to open up any other admins. So
like I said, after like 10 minutes, we're gonna just let everybody in. So just keep letting people in and checking them off, and then add them as a guest if they're not on the list. Yeah.
Perfect. You got it.
All right. So we've got our call updates. That's a great point. Is who updates the documents? So updates the docs and has access. As for having access though, I give everyone read access. Everyone at the project should be able to read every document. There is no reason to hide any documents on a project ever. You should never put stuff into a personal folder in my mind. You should never put stuff into my drive and then cherry pick who gets to see it. When you are working on a project and you have a document that is for your project, be it in progress or complete, it should be shared in a project folder. There is nothing worse than sitting there and finding out, oh, so-and-so rolled off the project, but now we can't access any of their files. And they only shared with these 2 people who had already rolled off the project. Now we've got to redo our entire process diagram. Been there, horrible to be redoing your process diagram late in build because all the BAs have swapped out.
Lucid is my new best friend. Lucid Chart has a comment ability. You can read and comment, but you can't change.
And
I think I'm in love with that permission level.
I'm a huge fan of turning on comments. People can add all the comments they want to my documents to go through. I think it's great, especially when there are other architects on the project, for them to add comments. So one of the documents I own on my current project is the end-to-end document. We're on the second half of the project, or the second wave of our project. And for the first wave of the project, it was the document I created. We've had new people come in because we have a much bigger project now for this wave. And it was the document I started, it was the document I was working on. Comment, comment, comment. Yeah. And this also keeps the person that's in charge of that overall design aware of the changes. There's nothing worse than being the person that's the like enterprise architect or the overall architect on a project and finding out, oh yeah, we cut a system out, but you find out when you are presenting to your client's leadership team and you have no idea because nobody bothered to tell you, or you're looking for it on a diagram and you can't find it because somebody deleted it on accident. It's a pain in the butt. So update. Use comments, open things up. Everyone should have read. Everything should be in a shared folder. And then documents to include. Let's do shared folder. Folder, read for all, and then limit updates, and then give comment to all. Now I like to give comment to all. Not just, for example, on architecture diagrams to architects, because especially when like BAs are doing refinement and they're working with the client, they're working directly with the client so much, they're so face-to-face with the client's going to ask them questions. Them putting a comment onto that document, especially if I'm not on that call, gives me the ability to say, just got my pop-up in the corner. It says somebody put a comment on Lucid. I need to get that person, their answer. But it may not be a question for an architectural question. It may just be, is this connected here or here? The client, we need to know for whether or not we're going to write a story about it. Super helpful. Also saves you a meeting, because as an architect, I'm sure every architect on this call knows there are so many meetings all day. Like I sometimes wonder what I always used to think architects got to do all this cool, super fun stuff. No, architects attend meetings and then after work, they get to do their design. And, it just makes it so you can cut one of those calls out. Even just getting that 30 minutes back, that 15 minutes back makes a huge difference in your day. And then so here, I'm going to go back into clicking. We're going to do click. All right, so next thing, what documents? All right. So every single project needs an ERD. Every single project needs a system landscape. I also include my security matrix, although it's not required for, not in CTA. CTA per se. However, in every project. You may not need it in your CTA, but you gotta know who has access where in your CTA. Sketching yourself out, a little security matrix helps. Now, how you sketch that out can vary. Document number one, example of like a security matrix. What is the object, the different people across the top for the profiles, and then marking them down. Mind you, it's a little bit out of date because it's an original template from before, and I can't show my current project diagram that I've been on for quite some time. But not so much am I using profiles anymore. I'm using perm set groups. So I also have one that does quick add this in while we're here so we can all see it together. This is my permission set names here. Permission, I can click, I swear. Set names, and those go here. Name. There we go, name. And I also do on here, I also include my license. So this would probably most likely say Salesforce. This one would say CPQ, and I'm going to go back to fix that because I can't spell. And this one would say Salesforce. Now, one thing that drives me nuts is when people do not list out the licenses, and you may realize that if you don't mark Salesforce as your license type on your permission set, you don't get a pick for the tabs. Next thing you know, you've got a team that's building a bunch of stuff out, but nobody can actually find anything. Especially if you're working in a community and people are building stuff without tabs, nobody can ever find the data. So listing out the license type, big fan. And then here I'll do like my description. We should always be documenting as we go. I think we've all heard that a self-documenting org is the best org we can have, probably a bajillion times. And to do that, by just including the description when we are making our stuff makes our life so much easier. And then here I actually do perm set group 1, perm set group 2. And I list my perm set groups across the top. I'll just do an X and just go like this and say that these people have these ones. Having that as one of the tabs in my matrix just makes it so much easier to manage. Now, speaking of access, this is where access comes up, and this is why I wanted to do this one first, Paul. So access, because I'll forget otherwise. Access to the security matrix when you have multiple people that are building and different Scrum teams have different architects. You cannot limit this to only one architect. You're going to go insane. There is so much stuff to track. Each architect should have access to this document, and they should have access to the items they are putting in. I'm a big fan of color coding it. I like to mark all my stuff in pink. Everyone else can pick their own color. And then you go through, those are your columns for your people and you're in charge of them. It just makes it so much easier than me having to go and say, hey, did you build any fields today? Or do you have any fields coming up in next sprint? How about we list them all out? Now let's go through every single profile permission set group together. Nobody got time for that. I'm sorry, I barely have time to eat lunch before 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. So giving access to all your architects to the matrix. Also, if you've got a client that's building, that client's arc for their Scrum team should also have access. Yeah.
Hey, Tracy Green, do you have a variation on this that you use?
Actually, no, it's exactly very, very similar. So it's just like, right. I think the biggest thing is going across the top, like you said, and doing the X's. That's absolutely the way I do it. And the color coding is another way I do it. I'm super color coded person on everything I do. And it's really a way of tracking, right? Because then you can always go back and track. So instead of like trying to say, oh, who made an update? You're like, oh, it's a new thing that's in pink. I know it was Megan.
Right. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And you know what? I am just a huge, so I know everybody, so I always put a little key in on my first tab. It's not like colors mean like a question mark. My first tab is always a key. And it'll say the colors, it'll explain what each tab does. And we'll go through from there. And that way people know what's up. I'm gonna do this one really quick as perm set.
Christian, what about you? You came off mute for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, just wanted to ask if it's individual usernames you have in the name, or if it's actors. What do you?
So this is a very good point. So this is a perm set name. So yeah, I list my permission sets down the side on this one, and then the actors are the perm set groups for the most part. So this would be my AE. This would be my CSM. This one is support.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because I like to group so having been an internal admin before I went into the consulting world, one thing I always had to get people onboarded was I used to carry around an Excel sheet. They told me when I am setting up a person on the corporate sales team, these are all the things I need to add to them. Instead of a person on enterprise sales, these are all the things they get, so on and so forth for every department. So I have since taken and in consulting world, switch that over all into perm set groups. And so all their custom permissions, all their perm sets, their data category access, whole shebang goes onto that perm set group, really reducing it down to maybe the perm set group for the vast majority. And then a couple of people get a one-off permission set aside to them. Yeah.
So I've got a dumb question. I always assumed, and I kind of always start out application design with permissions and roles and profiles. I usually have a Venn diagram of the different roles of people that are going to be using the tool, and their, basically what their permissions will be across the application before I start. Is that is that something you don't find is doable except
I don't,
for
I,
inline?
I have never found that doable. I know I can do it definitely before the sprint, but I cannot do it before a sprint. No story has groomed that well, and it's gonna change. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I think I'm waterfalling it. Okay.
I've never done diagrams for permissions. I always just do it in a matrix. Yeah.
Okay.
I
all
think you can
permissions
do that
and all
at the
personas,
object
yeah.
level, but probably doing that at the field level is not realistic at the beginning.
I just would describe the roles and of each type of person interfacing with the application and what you expect to do, and then start throwing those perms into perm set groups based on that.
So I definitely don't put them into the perm set group until in the sprint because of the fact that it's too mixy matchy. Plus, you know, your persona and your perm set group are not the same. I've never had them be the same. You've got differences between your personas and your perm set groups where, like, for example, right now, my CSM, my AE, my TSR, and my SA, those are all personas in terms of they use the system differently, but they all have the same permissions. So they may be attacking the objects different, but they all have the same perm set groups because they need access to each other's fields on like opportunities to be able to make, to see and edit. And we don't want to make a permission set by field. That's going to just get insane and take our client back to where they were before with too much out there. And they're going to end up with 2,000 permission sets again when they only really need, you know, 50 at the very, very, very most. And then I really limit my profiles to be, I don't start a profile. I start everyone on the same profile besides the admin until I get to a page layout that has to be different for a record type. Once I have a record type that has a different page layout, that's when I drop in a new profile. And I will go throughout, limit my profiles to only be starting once I have one of those one-to-one items. That's the only time I'll ever make a new profile.
Okay.
I hate making profiles. I find it, as somebody that came about 15 years ago into all of this, where that was our only option. Oh, here's the profile because they need to be able to click the expected amount field. Here's a profile that says that they cannot edit the amount field. It just got too messy. So yeah, profiles I try to keep to on most projects. Even, you know, looking at like a $10-15 million project, I've done it with 5 profiles that are custom profiles. And then the admin profile, of course, because really when you take a look, if you put everything into permission sets, and you're only looking at things like a record type difference or your login, your IP ranges or things like that, all of a sudden you don't have those profiles anymore. And that's where, and I know that this actually came up on my current project. They're like, well, how do you do all your permissions if you can't list their profile inside the validation rules? So I actually did a blog post about how I manage my validation rules, which is a validation rule where I use a custom setting for a hierarchy custom setting. They can call people out by their profile. They can call people out by their name because most of these people that need them are one-offs. And so we drop it in here, or I use a custom permission. And I drop the custom permission under the permission set, and I associate that permission set with the profile. Whatever I can do to simplify it. And the thing to remember, though, is if you are doing this by doing the custom permission on the profile, you can't just remove that custom, or on the perm set group, you can't just remove that custom permission from a user. You actually have to go and like either take it away from everybody, or you've got to give everybody else custom permission, and then you can take it off of the perm set group. So I like to do it where it's as simple as possible when looking at it. The vast majority of my stuff I can throw into like a little matrix like this on hierarchy custom settings. And then also they can turn on and off their custom settings as needed for excluding people.
If you're sharing your screen,
oh shoot, we're looking at
Yesgate.
Restart.
Yep.
There you go.
There we go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
there we go. So they throw it into this little screen that's just a custom setting list view. You'll notice here all my, this is the validation rule, this is the validation rule, this is one, this one, this one. These are the people that are opted out. And so when they do a data load, they'll just go in, they'll add their person that's doing the data load, click all the checkboxes, that is the only person that will be excluded from all of the rules. They don't have to go into each object and turn off a data load or permission or validation rules. They don't have to go and do something funky to every single person. Do that, or I'll do the all for one and one for all as a custom permission, and you just associate it with that one person.
Thank you.
Just
Yeah, I didn't mean
depends
to
on
send you
how
down
many
a
different things. Yeah.
send you down a
Oh, no,
rabbit
it's
hole on
totally
permission.
fine.
So good stuff.
I love permissions actually.
Yeah, no,
because I have
I'm
spent so much time. Yeah.
I'm going to build up a deck that I'm going to have you present for me at our
So,
next user group on perms.
Chances are I've already got a deck for you, so let me send that over and you can take a look. Yeah. And then
Hey guys, I have a question slash comment.
Yeah.
So, what documentation do you start before the project, and what documentation do you start after the project or post? That's one question. And then along with that, there is this really awesome Chrome plugin that I love. It's called Salesforce Dev Tools.
Oh my gosh, that's what I use for my permissions and my fields and everything.
You can use it exports all this stuff to an Excel file.
Yep.
Including field level security by profile, all the field definitions for whatever objects you want, and a lot of other stuff. So
for those of you that don't know about the SF Dev Tools, I'm going to drop a shameless plug of a link in here. They just added the one for my profiles since after I wrote my blog post, but I got to admit, you are entirely right. That extension, I live and die by. It is my hero. What I'll do is I'll drop a tab into my security matrix and I'll just do a quick V lookup onto the master document, then I'll delete the extra tab. Try to make my life a little bit easier since I can't delete everybody's stuff and just pop my document in. Yeah.
The trick on this one though is it only documents what you have already built. So what I like to do is run it on a standard object at the beginning and then use that as a template as I'm designing fields and all of that stuff. And then at the end, if you do an export, and they should match, right, in theory.
And if you do that one where you get up to the full export, you can get the validation rules and everything else that comes with your object too. Now the problem with that one is it takes a while to load, in my opinion, because sometimes I'll be sitting there and I'll just sit forever, but I'll walk away and go get some coffee and I'll start working on a different tab. Yeah, and then I just come back to it. Because you can tell by now, I have no problem opening more tabs. But another one that's great though is the enabler for Excel connector and the Google Sheets extension by Zapier, by those people too. I want to call them Zapier, but it's X something. Yeah, Excel connector, they are amazing. So they do something very similar. But when you do your export, you can export absolutely everything you need. They have one specific for field level security. And you can go by profile or by perm set. They also have one for what fields are actually on the object that's been around forever. But they'll show you not only what's on the object, but what's editable on that page layout. And then another great one is, so I'm not 100% in VS Code yet. There are some things that I just missed that were in Sublime that don't exist. One of them is the How IDE, made by one of our amazing Ohana over in China. What it does is it actually has an export option. And I'm going to switch my screen to show this to you guys. I'm going to share the whole thing. I've got nothing open. I don't know what I'm doing a one window share for. Here we go. So when I switch over to my Sublime, he's got an option under tools where you can export. Let me go up here because the bar is always where I want to click. If I go here under How IDE and go into his export, he's got one that says here for profile. That'll export an Excel workbook that gives you a tab for your tabs, a tab for your fields, a tab for your objects, and one for your system and application permissions for everyone in the system. Oh my gosh, talk about an amazing export tool. This is probably the most full project friendly IDE extension I have ever worked with because of the fact that it lets you do so much more with data than VS Code does. And it lets you do all these really cool exports. Yeah, and I love it. And you have your data template, which does not give you any of your formula fields. So it's literally just what you are doing your imports to. Oh my gosh, what a lifesaver to sit there and not have to explain to people, that one's a formula, that one's a formula. or that one is actually being set by automation, so don't set it. If you just do the export from here and give them the data template, it takes care of everything for you. Amazing. So yeah, and then you can either do it by record type or in general. It is in Sublime, yeah. And it's a free extension available for you under the package control. Yep. And the Dev Tools is a Chrome extension. So let me grab you that one really. So I grabbed that one. Let me grab that IDE one too to drop a link in. Why do I keep clicking too much? Here we go. I want to go to this one. Also, guys, we're also admins. I don't know how to click. There we go. Well, now I'm moving to a ton of stuff, so it's going to take a second. So I just ordered a new iMac, by the way. Oh my gosh, I love them. They're so pretty. I can't wait till it arrives. It's on like back order though, so it should be here though next month for our event. I can't wait. I just wish I would share my screen for it. I got that pink one, of course, but yeah. By the way, the difference between the 7 and the 8 is whether or not it has 2 fans. Just so you know, for those of you that are looking at getting a Mac, specifically the iMac.
Post your AppExchange app link.
Yeah, I would like just to suggest a package which I built for managing bulk permissions for fields, objects, and tab. Maybe it might be useful for this collection of apps.
Yeah. Do you want to show us anything, or like share the link?
I can just copy the link
Perfect.
to the chat.
I will click on the link that, and I can let me share that really quick so we can show our screen. As soon as we go back to Zoom and hit the button. So then this is the one you just shared. Actually, let me drop this link too. This is the Sublime. All right, there we go. And then going back to sharing my whole desktop. Awesome. And so this one is the AppExchange one. Awesome. Nice. Very cool. Fantastic. I love it.
If you scroll amongst these screenshots, you can see the interface. So it allows to bulk update and read like permissions for multiple objects, fields, profiles, permission sets. And
so I gotta say, I've used the config workbook for that, but you only get a couple of tries and then it goes away. I can't wait to install this, just so you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going. Sorry. I just want to say, like, whoa, like, do I only get like 3 tries or 7 tries, or is it always free?
So for now, it's always free. Also, it has like, if you click this checkboxes in the column, it would set the same value for all of the rows. So it helps, like, for example, if you have tons of profiles and you just need to give the same permission set to the same permission level for all of these profiles, you can just click on this header row checkbox and then click save. And this would save time when you try to like make the same permission set for many objects or many like profiles, because Salesforce doesn't have such native functionality to manage permissions in bulk. So that's I decided
does this work across orgs, or does it work only in one org? Can I push to like another org with it?
So it works on the org that you are using it. It doesn't work across orgs.
Okay. Just curious, yeah, because I think permission deployments are probably one of my least favorite things in the world. I'm always looking for a way to solve them. So yeah, no, this is fantastic. I'm gonna try this on my project. I'm gonna see if we can get approval to get it installed. And then for our
Blanca, Leon Carter, you still out there? Have you got anything to add from what we've gone over so far? Sorry, just trying to pull other people into the conversation.
You're good. Yeah, one thing I wanted to point out though really quick before I forget is those of you that hate permissions deployments, Blue Canvas has an extension to help you deploy your permissions that makes it so easy. Totally free, and it's down in their on their regular homepage instead of their blog homepage. But yeah, I'm gonna drop the link in for that one too. It is amazing. So I'm gonna totally share that too, because I know we all hate permissions deployments. If anybody likes them, I've got a ton that I would love you to take care of for me. Just let me know, but they just never deploy right.
Marlene, you came off of mute.
I was just curious, just a really quick question. You mentioned approval before you install it. Is that just your standard approval for App Exchange apps or vendor? Like, what does that look
Our
like?
client requires approval for any App Exchange apps that are going into any org, including dev orgs. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
So that's a full
just
security
standard.
review and everything else with it, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
It's for security review. Yep. And
That's what I do too.
yeah, it's something I've just gotten kind of the habit of, is always ask before you install. Never install anything without asking. You can always push up a file. Let's say you have an unmanaged package, you put it into your dev org, you test it there. You need to just move a flow or an object that you've used before, like your validation rule settings. You don't want to keep making it over and over. Do a quick upload of just the object with no fields. Deployments, absolutely. Our installs absolutely need to be reviewed, because chances are, if it's on App Exchange, it has more than just an object of fields.
Thank you.
Yeah. And this is that profile and permissions deployer. You can just compare profile to profile, permission set to permission set in each org. It tells you the differences, and then you can check what you want to move over from the other one. So easy. I love it. And then, by the way, if you haven't used Blue Canvas, their actual deployments stop in Git before going to your org. So you always go to a repo. Your stuff is always in source control. Highly recommend checking them out if you're not using a deployment tool at this point in time, or if you're struggling with source control, or if you're looking at a deployment tool. They stop in Git every time. You don't have to do anything. Talk about a lifesaver. And it will record every single deployment, not just the ones your people remember to put into the repo. Yeah. And you can associate with tickets and things like that. Yeah, right, just great. I love it. All right. So many shameless plugs to talk about all the cool apps. All right.
Sorry, this is Gaurav Bhatnagar. I'm calling from Los Angeles, California.
Yeah.
Question. So last 20 minutes, the discussion has been for creating different forms of security matrix.
Yeah, we got a little sidetracked. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
sorry about that.
So point is for the larger group. So this 20 minutes was how to create security metrics. The first option you created was manual, and then
I wouldn't say just how to create security metrics, more of what to be tracking, who should have access to it, and then different ways to track permissions and security within your environment. And pretty much in the long run, one of the big things, and kind of circling back to the beginning, is whatever you do, just make it repetitive, make it something you get used to. So when you have to talk about security on any of like your exams, such as CTA exam, it's something you're used to doing in the same pattern. It's all about pattern when it comes to security. But yeah, then we talked about each one of the different documents. Yeah, and tools. Yeah.
Perfect. So because I need to use it for my current client, documentation, as you know, is very poor in agile projects.
Oh yeah.
So so this is needed. So I'll use one of the options which has been discussed in the last few minutes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and then for everything that goes into our chat, by the way, for those of you who haven't been on before, we do put everything into the slide. We also kind of just go through our transcripts and make sure that we get our big bullet points. We take all of the links from our chat, and then we'll put them in here, and we do tie it to the YouTube video. So when you're watching the YouTube video, you've got all your links in one spot. We'll also drop it into the RoadToCTA chatter group, so that if you want to just check out either the video or the links, everything will be right there for you, and all tied together. So yeah, especially I know we just went through a ton of different things about security, everything from security deployments to simplify them, to how to track, who should have access when tracking, and when do we actually end up recording. Paul, it sounds like you do your recording outside of fields the very get-go. And I've just never found that possible at a project, but I try to do it by sprint. If I don't have it in the beginning of a sprint, I've had projects where they won't let us build without security predetermined. So I just got into the habit where you got to know for the sprint, if you're building it, who's using it. I also don't like to build stuff we don't use, because I remember back when I first joined consulting, especially, the client would want something, they'd have this great idea, and it would be a great idea, but there would be no process to support it. And so it would get built and then nobody would use it because we came up with something cool, but there was no process. And then all of a sudden it was, here's a build for, throwaway work down the road that just ended up being garbage for them. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Those processes to support document maintenance are critical. So yeah, don't build something you can't spend the time updating, because as soon as you make it, it's, it's old. So if you're not going to keep it up to keep it accurate, it can't go through there. And I was just about to ask about process diagrams. So ERDs are definitely something I do inside of the application, but when I'm talking about a connected application, I called it an XRD, and I'm curious to see what everybody else calls it when you talk about the data connectivity across systems. So
So really quick, I'm talking less about data with process diagrams. So let's change that one. So let's do system connectivity.
Well, I like to look at the, if accounts are connecting to a different provider, I like to, the account may include the account object, but just still logically, it's still talking about the holistic account concept, and that gets data from this data source. And so I'll draw kind of a connected map from logical concepts and show which systems they live in.
So all of that is on my end-to-end system landscape. I've got my lines, one for going in, one for going out, and I write which objects go in and out.
Okay.
Yeah, I try to put that all into one diagram. Yeah, and it's just for me, it's just a system diagram with each of the different systems. And again, my color coding comes in. Things we aren't touching stay gray. Connected apps are pink. Installed packages are green. And then custom integrations, things like custom integrations will be with, usually we're using an ETL tool. But so for example, if we're using MuleSoft, every MuleSoft integration is going to be a purple line. Yeah.
I was going to jump in and say, I do the same thing. It's all my system landscape. That's exactly what you do, right? That's what the whole idea of having a system landscape versus having just a view. And then what I do, right, so you have that big system landscape, and I take little pieces of that and I make smaller documents. So for people who don't need to see the whole thing, so you kind of just do a view of it, and I just kind of break it down that way.
Exactly, yeah. And I try to group my stuff by each team. Like I'll do marketing in one corner, sales in one corner, finance in another corner. And that way, when I break it apart, I just need to take a section of the diagram and like slice and dice. I don't have to grab the whole thing and like redo it all. I'll just take like right now, my project, the bottom half is sales. So I'll just take the bottom half of it from Salesforce and send that over. Finance is the upper left. So I send that over. And then marketing is the upper right. So I send that's in my marketing diagram. Yeah. And then it's all together in the system landscape. Yeah. So for me, it's all about putting it into one, since you're going to need that on the integration team to know what's going everywhere. And they're going to want to know high level which objects are going in and out. Now for which fields, I'll jump in to like an actual like integration diagram. And I am so excited. Lucid just came out with the new Salesforce templates for integrations. I don't know if everybody's seen these, so I'm going to show them because I love these. You haven't started using Lucid yet for your Salesforce projects. They've taken everything from the architect site and they've started to make it into a template for you. So first of all, they had the import for Salesforce, so you could get your ERD. Then they added in the landscape documents. So you could do your, level 4, level 3, level 2, and your double click level 1, and really get into it and see, here's that section here, here's that. But for me, it's not until you get to that double click that you're really looking at process. So when I'm thinking about process, I'm thinking about what is it that somebody is doing to get across the system as a human, much less system oriented, but more human oriented. And, a lot of that is done working with, on a project with your BA, but in your exam, you got to do that on your own. So knowing how to get your process together from the scenario, definitely important. I know it comes up a lot on our calls when we are working as a group. Yeah. I'm going to quick show off those templates. I think they're phenomenal. I can't believe they added the integration ones. It makes my day. Now, if you're working with people that do integrations for everything, I've noticed that not all of them are familiar with the Salesforce like layouts of stuff because they have Salesforcey things written on them. They're the exact same diagrams they're used to. They just have Salesforcey words. That's it. If we take all the words off, they'll know exactly what it is. Yeah. So I've noticed, especially when working with an integration team that's used to working in custom systems, take the words off before you give it to them. Otherwise, they're going to sit there and say, this is Salesforce. I don't know what this is. Yeah. Oh, just do it here. Let's do Salesforce. But yeah, check this out. This makes my day to see all these when they eventually load. Anyone else using Lucid templates?
Absolutely. I live by them.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, they're phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And you know, I've taken things where I've gone with they've got your sales models in there. They've got everything pre-laid out for you for an ERD now. So you don't even have to draw it. You just have to delete the objects you don't use. Like right now, my responsibility is Sales Cloud. Yeah.
Anyone got anything that they say was better or they use in some cases instead of Lucid?
No, Lucid is the best one, Paul, and I think it's
okay.
The best one.
I agree, but you only know unless you ask until somebody says there's a better one.
Visio is the worst one. Visio is the worst one.
I've got people that only work in Visio that I've worked with on a project, and they've really struggled with switching over to Lucid. I've also noticed that my work computer is a Windows machine. It does not keep my scroll bar on the side in Lucid, and I can never find it when I zoom in. Unlike on a Mac, when it's there all the time, it really is all there on the time. But when I use it on Windows, it's not there all the time when I tell it to be. So just a heads up for those of you that work on Windows. I don't know if you have any tricks with making it, I don't know, I'm still adjusting to using a Windows machine for the first time in my life. So any feedback or help is appreciated. But like on my project.
The draw, I did do draw.io, which gets you really far, but Lucid just takes it over the edge. I actually was lucky enough to talk with their product manager. They like totally interviewed me, and like all these things that I told them that I needed as an architect, they built in. And so they are so committed to like getting us what we need for Salesforce that I'm just so impressed with like literally like things that I just said, oh, here's something that I do, and like it's in there now. You're like, that's to me, that's really a product that really cares about Salesforce.
Which product was that? Was that Lucid or Draw?
Lucid. Okay. Yeah, for sure. Lucid, they ask a million questions.
And speaking of Lucid and the work that they're doing with Salesforce Architects, by the way, that reminded me, Salesforce Architects has an open blog thing running on right now. If you can submit a blog post by February 14th, they're looking through them to see what can go on the Salesforce Architects blog. So you've got a blog post, submit it. That would be awesome to read, like posts from all of you about your tips and tricks with architecture. Yeah. Sorry, somebody else was starting to talk, but I was going to forget about the blog post. Go ahead.
No, it's Marlene. I was just going to say definitely Lucid has a partnership with Salesforce. I don't know how public they're being about it, but they're definitely connected, right? Which is really great. And you mentioned integration templates. I know this is the ERD. Were there other templates you were talking about in particular?
So if you actually hop over to the architecture site, I think this is where you have to get to them from the site, and they're not in the regular templates yet. So this one I was just showing it to you. When you create it, it'll pop up and you can just delete what you don't use. Everybody's heads is on top of my end tab. So I'm gonna go here, architects, that's Salesforce. But yeah, they just made those integration templates. I think probably within the last month, I started seeing them. Architects at Salesforce. There you go.
Yeah, I'm trying to go here about once a month because they are posting a lot, and it definitely is very useful. I will share with you guys, my org has over 800 objects. Yeah, and I've joined the team a little while ago, and so these ERDs, I'm like, oh, that's a nice way to start. I wouldn't remove, I would just add and add and add. We have a permission set for every individual permission in Salesforce. So I want you to think about that.
So that sounds like a project I worked on, the one that sounds like the 2000 permission set project. They also had over 200 profiles.
And that's crazy.
So trying to work through it, and it's one where it's not taking care of all that tech debt while you're going for a lot of it, but it's also Yes, I understand there are things people don't need, but is it things people don't need or shouldn't touch? And having read access that's half the fields on the lead, or having read access that is every field on a lead that is for sales, versus half the fields on the lead that are for sales, not including any admin fields or any excess marketing fields. Do we really need to exclude sales from seeing any of the other sales fields that are oriented on leads? What about on accounts?
No.
Does somebody really just need all the account fields minus 3? Yeah.
This team took the approach of, it's a good idea, so let me build it for everybody. So a good example is you showed your validation rule bypass, right? We have a custom setting just like you do. They created every single user that gets created gets a record on that individual object.
Wow.
And I'm like, what? I'm like, my 8,000 users, it probably impacts maybe 50. And so our sandboxes take days and days to copy, right? And so we have so much integration, so much customization, things that aren't used that we're quite challenged.
So here are the new ones under the exact page that I landed on for Architecture Gallery. We got our pub sub, we got the fan out, we got the claim jig, we have pass messages, we have streaming and queuing. Yeah.
And the architects, the Salesforce Arcs group published, and I just put the link in the chat, a video on how to create architecture diagrams. I have not watched it, full disclosure, but it's nice to see the architect group coming out with more and more content and actually paying attention to this kind of stuff. It's great seeing architects become first-class citizens in the world.
And for those of you that haven't seen it, just the heads up. So what they do is they just kind of walk through how each one of the diagrams works, and then they describe their original diagrams that were like the first 5 diagrams that were on the architect site. So it's what are the different types of things for each connection? What do the different symbols mean? And then going through each of those things. And when you are building out your own diagrams, they've got their how to build right here for a document, which also gives you just as much info. But I'm a big fan of the diagram kit of parts. So it is a Google slide or a Lucid that you can get when you click into it. And it gives you each one of your squares, each one of your connectors, all your little boxes that are pre-designed for you, so that you can kind of just throw them up into the corner and clone them and pull them over instead of having to search through the sidebar. I've also created on Lucid, in my work Lucid, my own little set of images, and I loaded them in as my images, and I made it its own name for a section, so that when I go in, I type in Megan Salesforce, and then it pulls up everything that was in the diagram kit, so that it's nice and easy for me to find. Yeah. And then I shared it out with my team, hence it's called Megan Salesforce. I'm not talking about myself third person, it's for everybody. Yeah. So one of the great things about Lucid is just that ability to make your own image sets and share them out. I actually, when I was reading through this site, by the way, it was underneath on this page. I think it's on the next one, but anyways, so there's the one where they go through the different types of architecture, as in the sofa and things like that, or the sofa, those ones. I reached out to the writer of that article, and he's super nice, and he sent me some information back too, and he's got more out there. So if you're looking for more information about Salesforce architecture diagrams, don't hesitate to bother the people that are on the site. It's not a bother. They love hearing from us, apparently. So I started pinging everybody that writes posts on this site after that to ask what else they had. The worst they could tell me is no, right? So, and I've been told no how many times as an architect about stuff I've come up with because they want to go a different way. I'm used to it. I'll take it. But it's more of I love when they share extra stuff. Some of them have written books and have actual books about agile in architecture. Some of them have tons of articles about Salesforce Agile, which is super helpful because we all know Salesforce projects working in Agile turns out to be more of an Agile fall or a Wagile. And, there's stuff we got to pre-plan that we can't just go as a free-for-all because we've got that. And by the way, I know everyone on this call knows it, but just in case anybody listening is newer to Salesforce, Agile does not mean no requirements. Okay, Agile just means that you have your high level picture and you're going to refine your requirements as you go. I had a client once say, doesn't Agile mean no requirements?
I know, I get that all the time. It drives me crazy. For that Salesforce Agile, do you have the person to look up?
You know what?
I'm looking, I can see
I can grab you. So I got the book off of Salesforce, Amazon that they recommended,
Okay.
and then I've got a ton of links. I can just forward you the email.
That'd be awesome.
I've got it from your registration. I'll do that, and then
Thank
I'll
you
also
so
drop it into
much.
the deck. Yeah.
Perfect.
But you know what? Yeah, I know that I struggled.
What's the book name? What's the book name?
It's called like I think it's called like Salesforce Agile or Agile with Salesforce. Literally called one of those two inside Amazon. Yeah. If you type in Agile Salesforce, it's like the one that has both those words in the title that comes up. No other book has both words in the title.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I gotta say, it really helped me change the way I worked my projects. I'm still working on adapting it. I only bought it like 2 weeks ago, but I read it within like my first 4 days. It was so helpful. I started talking to my project leaders and everybody, and you know, there are just some things that I realized I could improve on that I was doing wrong. You know, because the Jira way and the Agile way, or I should say the Atlassian way versus the Agile manifesto versus how we all work on Salesforce projects, they're all slightly different, you know, and so figuring out how to make them all come together and be a proper design for a Salesforce project is really helpful. And so it's got a ton of best practices. And of course, I shared them out with my team too, but let me get that note too. Salesforce Agile book. Links from authors on Salesforce ARCs. Okay, and then I'm going to do, we're talking about process diagrams. Yes, so I pulled up Lucid. I started going into all my excitement about ERDs and the integration diagrams. But we'll notice here that everything has to start with the process. Just like on your CTA exam, you're solving for a process. They're going to ask you about a process. And I know that in practicing, that's one thing I've gotten my hand slapped for in the beginning, so to speak, was I focused too much on the technical and I didn't explain enough about the process that they were going for. So I've kind of had to adapt there. And so making sure that I can fully explain my processes, you know, what is it that's happening? Oh, they're hitting, my BDR comes in, the points on the lead hit 100, the lead score, lead gets reassigned to the BDR calls. This is where we need to have the rig lead update. This is where we need to have, you know, Salesforce marketing send out a notification for journeys. This is where that happens. It's just pulling all that together. It's not so much about the technical side when it comes to your process as it is about what does all that technical stuff we're talking about do relate to humans? And when you're somebody that works in consulting or on projects, or even somebody that's in-house that has to sell to their business, you don't talk to your business people in technical, because when we do, either A, we get solutions back, they make no sense, or they just aren't the way we want to go with the system. So we want to talk to them about what is it that is your end goal? What are you trying to do? What's your day in the life? And so when I think about process, I think about what's the day in the life when going end to end with the record. Yeah. And then documenting that out. And one thing that I have experienced in practicing for my CTA, and we actually have a CTA that's going to be speaking next month, Melissa Shepard, who just got her CTA. So excited. She's a rock star. She'll be talking through, you know, just what it took to get the CTA and what it was that she was doing. But I attend her sessions too. She has a group that meets 3 times a week. And, you know, it's walking through like, what is it that we're trying to do? What is our end deliverable that we are trying to get to on your exam? They don't want to know what are we trying to do with the system only. They also want to know what is our end goal as people. You know, you're going to have to be able to describe it not only as an architect, but as an architect. You're not only going to need to describe it as somebody technical, but you have to describe it as an architect, somebody that knows business and technical. And so working on these documents, being aware of these documents on your projects and on things you're working on, very important. These process diagrams are how I've worked with the business. I like to just bring them up when we talk through anything. If we're making a user story, there darn well better be a way that fits on the process map, because we got to have somebody doing it. We're not building it because this is the way it used to be, or this is the way you did it in another company. We are building it because this is what the reps here are going to do in getting from A to Z. And, it's just super important. And even who's got tips on process diagrams? Because I know I can always learn more about process diagrams, especially the more deeper I go into technical. It seems like the harder they are for me to build. Yeah.
I'd say that just like the thing we have, right? Color coding is so important with process mapping. Like to have that the color coding and having a legend, so you can completely like describe what. Because like a lot of times I know I'm visual, so I can build it. But in order to get my audience to know, I have to have a key to say what my colors are and what each like shape is. And so to really follow along, having a color coded legend has absolutely been a lifesaver for me.
And when you are using your shapes, be consistent. Your questions should, or your decisions should always be diamonds. If you are going off into another system, have that always be the same shape. Being consistent helps not only you in the long run, but it's going to make it easier for you to describe this to other people, because they can pull it up on their own and once again save you a meeting. Because we don't need a meeting to describe that. Oh yeah, here the one with the 2 bars on the side means it's going to another system, but here the circle means it's going to another system. Just be consistent. And then very similar, I do color coding too. Anything outlined in orange means it is part of the marketing cloud. Anything outlined in blue means it is Salesforce. I usually pick anything outlined in green would be Zora, anything outlined in purple would be Marketo. And then I like to fill them in with, so especially when you have things where you're being worked on by multiple people. Swim lanes are so hard when you've got multiple people touching it at the same time.
Yep, I was just about to bring that up. They make me, I think they're necessary sometimes, but they make me crazy trying to read them. I like the branching linear flows. I can't get around moving on through the swim lanes. I get it. I understand the value of isolating stuff, but viewing, I can't look at another one. I just go cross-eyed.
I think for me, like a swim lane is same thing like a system landscape, right? Very high view, like very, very high view swim lane, who's touching what, but then break out into these process maps and they kind of go together. So it's right, because you have to have a high view, who's touching what, and the swim lanes really help visualize at a very, very high level, but to get granular, you definitely can't do that with swim lanes.
Absolutely. And so I use my swim lanes in terms of, who owns it at this point in time. And my swim lanes are very much more so ownership related, and to show what are concurrent, like parallel processes, and keeping it in line with, we may be doing all of this in sales, but marketing is doing this. And here at the end of the opportunity, finance is starting to get involved. I got a swim lane for what finance is starting to do. But when they come together and they're both working on the same thing, I put that in the lane of the main owner, which is usually not switching it in lanes, in all honesty. I usually keep it in the same spot. I'll drop the lane when it goes to somebody else later, and we're not going to have the same go back up afterwards. That up and down thing drives me nuts. I find it impossible to read the process diagrams. And they go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Or when we have the same thing, like the same square on both of them, because they're both touching it. I don't need that. Why don't we just call out in the box that finance is here? Like, yes, it's owned by sales. Sales is doing the primary action. Finance is made aware. Great. But Salesforce is sending that notification, not finance. Yeah.
That kind of reminded me almost like to use something else, like using a RACI almost, right? Responsible, accountable, informed, and kind of using that kind of concept with a swim lane might be interesting to think about.
So mine are totally about ownership. Yeah. And I also like to, so another thing, speaking of ownership, coming up with processes that only relate to one person are extremely difficult, and should, at least for me, they're always saved till last. If I only have one person that does this process, I'm not building a system for one person. I'm building a system for a business. You got one dude that does that, that's great. We can come up with a manual way to do it. Let's finish up everybody else's stuff first. Just because, Bob likes to then go into the content library, and this is when only Bob does it this way, but everybody else does it this way. Why are we making a separate process for Bob? Like, just because Bob, is retiring in 2 years, or Bob is brand new, or Bob is in a different geography, or he works from home instead of being in the office, doesn't mean we should come up with a different process. Everyone should be on the same process, so these diagrams make sense, and we're not making a separate process diagram for individuals. Yeah.
Hey, Christian, you came off mute a second ago. Did you have something you wanted to pop in?
Yeah, so it was just about the abstraction level of the two different models, and I think Tracy said it. What I was going to say, basically, you only use the swim lanes for the high level stuff, and then if you need to double click on for a particular user story for one arrow or something, then this what you have here in the screen is more suitable. In my
totally
opinion.
agree with you. I love that.
Tracy's.
Yeah. Yeah, I love so, and that's a great way to put it. But thank you for like the summary too, and Tracy absolutely as well. For being vocal, and I appreciate you being vocal throughout this whole thing. You're amazing. And so very much when I do my very first like process diagram, right after the very first requirements, I draw out a high level process diagram. Now that process diagram is not the same process diagram we usually end up using at the very end, obviously. Tell me, if you've ever had a project that didn't change from your first session or requirements, I don't know what you're doing, but you must be a wizard, okay? Like, or a witch. It's amazing. So that'll be my high level diagram that I share out with the team. And that's what we'll use to like start our conversations for refinement and requirements and discovery. But by the time we get into like actually talking through those stories, after the first 3 discovery sessions, it's entirely different. You know, they usually walk me, and I like the day in the life of now, and I like to hear about in your dream world, what would you like to do? And I gotta say, there are some places we're talking to them about their dream world. I'm not saying we can do it, you guys. I just want to say, if you had the perfect process, what would it be? Some people find that very difficult to go through because they've never thought about the perfect process. They've only thought about how do I work within the system I have, and getting them to open up and, you know, really explore, especially when redesigning, or let's say you're going to a greenfield org, or you're switching systems over into Salesforce. You know, when they tell you that ideal scenario, it's probably totally different with versus the process that they had planned, because, you know, some of the things they didn't know they could do, or some of the things that would be a ton of effort, but are really quite small. And it's all about just making sure, do we know what it is? Can we hear it? And knowing what it is and knowing what their end goal is just gives you a better build as a whole, especially because you're usually talking with the business. The business is not in Salesforce backend all the time. You have no idea what it takes to do each one of the things because they're not keeping up with every Salesforce release. So yeah, definitely helps. And I know, Paul, watching the time, you got your presentation coming up soon.
Yep.
I want to make sure
I gotta drop and hop over to that and tell people how to break flows.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I'm gonna quick do a stop share so we can let you go, and then I'm gonna do there we go. Awesome. All right. So Tracy, I made you a co-host. I hope that's okay. Excellent.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right, jumping into it. So our first slide, we talked about our ERD, our system landscape, security matrix, general documentation. So I called this out, but we didn't really talk about it. General documentation. So, one other thing before we get to that though, is especially when you're working on things, not just your security matrix, I wanted to point out that for me, this is profiles, perm sets, perm set groups, and I also include my role hierarchy in here. So especially if you're getting ready for your CTA, your role hierarchy is one of the documents you need to pull together. So having that role hierarchy is part of my security matrix. My favorite is when they're making changes in prod while you're getting ready, and all of a sudden you've got to redo your role hierarchy, and it's your very last sprint. And you just realize, because you were getting ready to deploy into UAT, wow, we couldn't deploy. What happened? Nobody could see anything in UAT. Well, the role hierarchy changed entirely, and it gave us a ton of errors. They came up with all new names and all of this stuff, and now nothing works. Document that role hierarchy, keep it in front of everybody. And in your CTA exam, you've got to go through your role hierarchy. If you haven't read the Certified Technical Architect book by Tamim that came out this past year, can't remember the last name, but it's on my list of must-have books. It's called Becoming a Certified Technical Architect. calls out each one of these diagrams and the importance of them in building. And then jump over to that last one here, documentation. So we've gone through the trouble to build all this stuff out while we're working on our project. We record our system landscape. We have our ERD. We have those process diagrams. Okay, the security matrix. We have our integration diagrams. We have our identity diagram for whether or not if people are using SSO, we got to figure out how they're going to log in. If you're using a login flow, how is that going to work? Just document it. One thing I learned, especially as projects get bigger, document as you go, and all these diagrams come together to give you the technical documentation you need to hand off at the end of the project. There is so little else that you have to put into them if you do them as you go and you do them thoroughly and properly, that it will just make your life so much easier, and you're not doing like 2 all-nighters in a row with a pot of coffee and yelling at everybody every 5 minutes because you're exhausted. You know, if you just get it done as you go. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've waited till the last day to start my documentation, and you know, obviously I've done the drinking coffee all night, trying to stay up. Next day I'm so grumpy and I'm so mad at everybody that like somebody just says a word wrong and I start yelling, or I snip. More likely I snip and I snap at somebody. And so get it done as you go. Don't make yourself wait till the last minute. It's going to make it not only easier for you at the end, but the entire project. Having it documented so you can see it as you build makes it so much easier. And I really want to open up the floor. Oh, yay! Yeah, people ordering books is making my day. Becoming Agile whilst delivering Salesforce. That is exactly the book that I just read. So helpful. And it's not, you know, how do you do super complex Agile stuff in Salesforce? It's about becoming Agile. How can you adjust what you're doing to work with Jira, to work with the manifesto, to work with clients that are waterfall? And it's just great. Really, really helpful. Same thing with the CTA book. I also have my Solution Architect Handbook and my Architect Handbook by PactPub that I have sitting like on my Kindle, like bookmarked as with stars, so they're at the top. You know, they've just got these little tips and tricks in them that help me with some of the gotchas. And then I just ordered the Data and Integrations book and then the Data Management book, both by PactPub, I believe. And happy to grab those links too. Oh my gosh, there's something about Salesforce books, by the way. I'm so hooked on them. I can't stop. Probably half the books I read are Salesforce, if not 75%. And they're just amazing. And having that information that has gone through this tried and true method for somebody else is one of the best ways to improve your methodology. My security matrix, I've been carrying that same matrix around for 8 years. And then I've probably got like 7 different variations of it, but it's all the same. And it's more of I use it over and over, you know, just because it's what I'm used to. Using tools to fill it out, that's the way that I save time. We mentioned the Salesforce Dev Tools. We mentioned that new package that was just shared that I forgot the name of already. I'm so sorry. The Salesforce Excel connector as well. And then you know, whatever else we've got available to us to try to make it easier. Salesforce extensions are lifesavers. I am actually going to stop sharing my screen, and I kind of want to open it up to everybody that's on the call. What else are you all using? What are some of the things that you include in your documentation or that you find vital in a project or that help you be more efficient or effective? Maddie, what about you, dude? Or Kyle, go.
I try to use, believe it or not, I still use Excel, man. I use like a deployment. I'll make like a coded deployment sheet where it's like, okay, if you're deploying anything, you got to list, you know, what the fields are, what the process is, or what the flow is, what org it's in, where you're trying to put it, and a short blurb of how it's going to, you know, change overall functionality, and then what Jira or what TFS ticket, you know, it belongs to. You know, you keep it password coded, you keep people updated in those particular sections, and it works. And it helped me because sometimes like our Jira and our TFS tickets, they would just get all out of whack and people wouldn't update anything. And believe it or not, the Excel sheet for some reason worked I don't know why.
So I gotta say, Kyle,
Same
I've
here.
got my offshore team working on a deployment workbook where they fill out what all their metadata is and the story number so that I can validate it against source control. I don't know. Call me somebody that is just a little over the top and controlling when it comes to my metadata, but I've seen so many times where we make it, but then we don't push it into source control or we don't deploy it. 100%, I do the same thing. That is a great point. Deployment workbook. And then also, I've got the, gosh, what was I just thinking? My mind just went blank. All right. There's something else I was going to say about the deployment workbook too. Oh, manual steps. Okay, if we are not writing down our manual steps as we go, it is only going to cause us problems later. So there's a tab for all the metadata and a tab for the manual steps. If you touched it and it's part of one of the tickets, you put that ticket number in there, and I want to know your step-by-step clicks, because chances are we're not the ones allowed to deploy to production. So we better be recording it as we go, because we can get us all the way to UAT, then all of a sudden it's somebody's first time deploying everything. No idea it's not going to work because somebody just memorized all their steps. Yeah.
Any tips for getting less experienced either developers or configurators, admins? How can we get them to accurately fill out a deployment workbook? Because they may not be familiar with the API names, the metadata, API, all of that stuff. I struggle with this every single day, and finally I gave up on the workbook because they just aren't able to fill it out.
So
I have a test line at the top. Oh, I'm sorry. You go. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you go. Okay. So for me, I've got on my very first page just kind of like a little cheat sheet, and also I've got a little square that's on there for a little note that's on there that says, if you're adding a field, I need your page layout, I need the record types, and then I need the profile. That's the biggest one I've had people struggle with, is not remembering fields take more than a field. So I have on every single one of mine, because I just make a copy over and over, a little note that tells them to include all of those. And if it doesn't have those, I won't accept it. I kick it back. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, fields and layouts and record types, that one's pretty good now. But like, for example, we're doing omni-channel with skills-based routing. Getting them to document that in detail is really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's extremely
Has
difficult.
anybody used Elements Cloud?
Yeah, I've actually done that before with omni-channel. What I did in the skills workbook is this: make preset drop downs in most of the fields that pertain to anything that's omni-channel. So you know you can make sure it's spelled right, make sure they're gonna get it right, and just always put like a test line at the top. And is this your first time doing omni-channel?
It's not my first time, but it's the team's first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, just what fun they shall have once you deploy it.
So I do everything I possibly can with drop downs. Even my metadata type, they pick from a drop down so that I know if it's deployable or not. And then data, I have a CP cube working with data. Oh my gosh. Trying to get people to realize how much is data in that and what data they have to record. I've got a specific one for communities that lists out, these are the manual steps for communities. And then I just remove the lines for the stuff we aren't working. And I say, put your JIRA ticket number on it. Communities are my specialty. So I got a ton of community like tips and tricks. And I probably have like 300 documents on community deployments and folders and projects. But CPQ is my first CPQ project in 8 years. So CPQ has changed a little bit. In 8 years. So
Marlene said something about Elements Cloud. I've definitely started to use that, and they have a really good, if you're a consultancy, they have a really good consultancy level package that you can use for across orgs, and it's so helpful for documentation and change management that it's like, if you can get buy-in, like I highly recommend it.
I'm definitely pushing for it.
Nice.
Sorry, and it also has.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just for Elements Cloud really quick, it has a connection to JIRA. Has anybody used that? Because if I can tie my story to my elements, to my metadata, that will be a great way for me to go back and review what we've built over the past 6 years. Because my org, like I said, it's very, very complex, and I'm trying to look for tools. But I haven't used CareSet.
Yeah, you can connect your JIRA story in Elements Cloud. Super, super easy, by the way. so that you can connect it to the squares that you're building out. Yeah. And that integration is pretty good. You can actually jump into the free one and they connect it straight up to Jira so you can play around with it.
Okay,
just so you know. Yeah. And what I've done
just one last
for new people. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, just one last thing, because you mentioned communities and what's deployable in metadata, right? I stepped into the current environment at the very last phase of one of the community projects, and the team that did it, amazing, excellent SI, I love them. But they had made the assumption from ages ago that you could not deploy audiences that are tied to certain pages, right? And so they were doing all of that manually across our 6 environments. And so just as a general architect thing, right, I think everybody on the call knows this, right? Don't assume that because it wasn't deployable last release, it isn't anymore. And so
correct.
they didn't bring it up until after production. And I'm like, wait, no, guys, you guys are wrong. We could actually do this, pull it into the repo, not erase everything, right? And make sure that you're keeping up to date, like especially if you have offline spreadsheets, like you mentioned, Megan, and I'm pretty sure you do because I can tell how organized you are. Make sure you update those with the releases.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a huge one. And that's one that I do with like even my features that don't exist in Salesforce or that you've got to call support for to have them turn on, I should say. I'm taking every release. Every release Salesforce is coming out with so much new, which is exactly why going off of like a not Salesforce person's idea of a solution, in my experience, has turned out horrible because they're basing it on Salesforce like in 2010 when they last saw a setup because somebody made every person an admin. Yeah. And for audiences, yes, you can deploy them, but you've got to connect them to the pages in the other org. Just so you know.
That's the part that's deployable now. So if you actually manage to get it into your repo
with it. Yeah. So you've got to double check every one of them. So yeah, just go in, double check it. My last one lumped all of my object pages under one object using the experience bundle. And so I had to delete all of my objects and re-put in every object page manually. There was no way to get it out of our org. Every org we deployed to from that org lumped them all under one for some reason. And it was just horrific, just trying to get through everything with that. So yeah, some of those new features, yes, they're great. Double check, do a manual check of everything. Yeah. Especially if it just came out in communities, just because there's wonkiness with the experience bundle. Yeah,
API 48. So it's been around for a while. It's just it was newer, and like I said, this SI just knew it from ages and had not verified it. So
yeah, and even my last project that I did last summer, we couldn't get our audiences connect to dynamic pages or dynamic components. We got all of the pages deployed, we got all of the audiences deployed, but they didn't end up connecting. Yeah. And so experience bundle is great. It gives you more in the experience bundle than it does in the site.com file. So don't go to site.com unless you've tried experience bundle and it won't work. Yeah. All sorts of fun tips and tricks. And don't go to a site import unless site.com won't work. Yeah. Good times. I actually had one of those last year where I actually had to import my site like old school style from before you could even deploy communities. For some reason, there was just something about the page that just would not get accepted. We tried doing pieces of it. We tried doing everything. Yeah. Ended up just having to go with an import and then just manually going through and resetting a handful of the items. Still, way less time than rebuilding. Yeah. And, especially when you go into that first environment, document all those steps again. Verify. And if you're the one doing the deployment, write in all the steps they missed. Don't just think that they're going to put them in because you asked them to. You gotta verify. But for me, really quick, gear set. When I've worked with a junior team, using GearSet as my deployment tool, I have them build the deployment in GearSet, but they can't deploy it. That's where they set it up for code review. And underneath each item, it tells you what is and isn't deployable and what items are related. You can hit this little expandy button, and actually have my GearSet license for my MVP so I can share that screen. So, and it just makes it so easy for somebody that's used to using change sets to figure out how to do it. Because it's very, very similar looking for them because they're just clicking checkboxes. But at the same time, you're getting so much more out of it because it's telling you also what is everything else that is related without having to go into like a dependencies button or anything like that. Big win. That's what I was able to do. At the last place I worked, I got moved over from not using source control, and everyone deploying independently all the way up to prod with their own change sets based on their own stories, which has to be the most terrifying thing I had ever heard of in my life, is giving everyone the right to deploy just because there was no tracking. So they made their own change set and they would do their own thing. And there was nobody that got to see the overall deployment package as one package. I got them onto source control and CI/CD, with just getting everybody into the habit of using gear set, and then of course the automation that comes with it. Plus gear set's got some great tools, so many deployment tools out there that are fantastic. Gear set also lets you monitor your org, so you can see what those changes are each day. They also have a data deployment option, so that you can say, hey, we're deploying this, so we now need all this data to support it. Helps you with CPQ, helps with communities, helps you with just general migration. Yeah, big help. But like show that clicky checkbox thing for those who haven't seen gear sets. So blue canvas, awesome for permissions, just makes life easier. And then gear set for deployments as well. Yeah, and it's all about those templates, just like you said before. Yeah. And then once I show this, anybody else who has stuff would be phenomenal. So let me do applause share quick so I can make sure that I don't have anything in here I'm not supposed to show. Gotta love it. We're just gonna go from one of my sandboxes to one of my sandboxes if it doesn't come up. There we go. Oh, and by the way, gear set now partially loads. So it'll show you the screen without waiting forever. So you get to actually see, here is some of our metadata. It's pulling over the rest of it from the comparison, but it's doing all the metadata in an order now, so that you don't have to wait so long for the screen to come up. Oh my gosh, that made my day. Because as you know, waiting for that gear set screen sometimes used to take forever. And now super fun to make it just go so much faster. And then okay, this is down to just 6 items. So we'll do here. Zoom share. But yeah, makes life easier to just have stuff pre-laid out for you. And yeah. All right, what else we got? What other crazy documentation are we out there recording? What documentation do we record that's just individual for certain projects? I know for communities, there's a ton of stuff out there. I've got a workbook just for communities because so much is different. Yeah.
I think you mentioned CPQ, like that workbook is so important. Like there's no way to like not document CPQ. I mean, it's just, you set yourself up for fail if you're not documenting everything. So I think that's huge in documentation.
And then just so you know, so Capado and Blue Canvas both have packages for deploying CPQ specific, like they do the whole thing where they know what data is preset for CPQ, so they'll pull it together for you. And you get to decide which of the little CPQ groups of data do you want to deploy. Yeah. But you'll notice under here, oh, by the way, look at, see, it's still pending and coming up. I love it. It took so much less time. Like when I go under my custom object, it tells me when it depends. Oh, it's still coming up for the dependencies. Well, wait a second. Oh man, it's gonna change items. There you go. Underneath account, we have here that we have what's changed. We also know what is using the account. It's used by this account lead field. And then in terms of components, these are all the places that are on the account that we're using it. And so having something like this where they can just go through and do their little checky boxes makes it so much easier. And they get to see all those dependencies all at once. Yeah. And they can be like, oh, I totally forgot to record that, but I really did change that thing. That's right. No one's mine. I know I've done it too, where it's been like, oh my gosh, I thought that one was one I was playing with. It looks like it's a dependency and I got to include it. My bad. Or I've got to remove that POC off the page layout before I try to deploy. Yeah. So yeah, makes life easier. And being able to see it, very similar to what Tracy said. I'm so visual. Yeah, I gotta see it. And it's gotta be easy for me to understand. Not everybody follows all my colors, but that's what the key is for. Yeah, and
one thing, sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
one thing I just wanted to say, because gear set is a bit expensive for some people. Like I have it because we use it at work, so I got a license, luckily. But not everyone gets it. So one thing that we use occasionally for the rest of the team who want to check who did what, or if they don't remember, what thing they modified, is the setup audit log that you can download.
It is like the total hidden thing. people don't know about it on my team. And so people say, I didn't do it. And I just go in there and I just see the audit log. And you're like, oh, hello. Like you changed this thing.
Who did what?
Exactly. It's one of those, it's like I always call it like the secret menu, you know, of like
Right.
Salesforce. It's such an awesome tool that I just keep in my back pocket all the time.
Or
There's
if they say
also-
they did something and they didn't really, then you can also check.
Yeah. Or they did it later. Yeah. There's
Or they
also
did
the
it, but they
change set helper, which is a free extension on Chrome that when you go in to build a change set, will show you the items that have changed and who authored them. So if it's available on a change set and you throw on change set helper and they want to go through the little drop downs for each like metadata type, you can see it right there inside change set helper. It'll tell you what's different in this org than the other org and what date it was changed and by who. And they turn red for the ones that were modified. The ones that were new have a blank on the other side, of course. Free extension helps you build it and then just use the organizer to download the package file. Yeah. I'll drop that extension link in too. There are so many things I did before I had something like your set to use that I came up with every extension under the sun that I had tried. Any other cool extensions for documenting, by the way, since we're on extensions? Or apps. We talked about the one for security. We talked about elements. Yeah, there's so many out there. There's Octopus too. Oh, really quick, I can just share my screen and show you the cool change set helper one. I was going to drop the link in, but it turns out I actually have it. So yeah, you'll notice here for this one, it's just the package one, but let's go back to screen. It'll show you what it was, when it was last modified, who it was modified by, and you can press a button to connect to the other org. And it'll say you've connected to your other org. It can be any org, by the way. And then it'll do the comparison. So not bad for free. There we go. There's the comparison. So it's showing you the other side of things. Yeah. Not bad for a free tool. Super helpful for people that are new. It doesn't help them get everything, but at least get the main items that they changed. Yeah. Right. Bill, it's nice to see you. Welcome.
Hi, Megan.
Hey, I haven't chatted with you in a while. I'm so glad you made it.
Yeah, because I was quite busy. I assume you are busy as well. I sent you a couple of messages.
You know what? I still haven't. This is going to sound horrible, but I was about to say I still haven't cleaned up my my stop sending me emails from last year at Dreamforce. So I still have all of those Dreamforce messages that keep flooding my inbox because apparently I put my real email address down instead of my spam email address. And so if you send me an email, I probably never found it. I'm still finding stuff from like work because somehow they got my work email too. So I'm still finding stuff in my work email that I was like, oh, I should have responded to that about my project, shoot. But I got too many partner messages to find it. By the way, anybody actually use their real email address when they sign up for Salesforce events, or do you all use like a separate email?
I use my real email address because it's just a way, because I'm always like, I move around and it just gives me, I have a like a filter on it. So I kind of, when I get something from a Salesforce thing, I kind of just organize it that way. Because I have so many email boxes, I lose track. I miss things. Like, you know, I just really need to like have a way of it like popping up for me to like, otherwise it's so easy just to miss things if I have like a spam email that I use.
I got asked to not use the one that was called junk@meganrocks.com by one of the my Salesforce signups. So I just changed it. I was like, somebody was like, you realize that you're not supposed to do that, right? And I was like, but how do I get not spammed and I still find all my emails? Yeah. Yeah, it's always an issue is those, because projects take so much time, and then especially if you get like in a heated one, next thing you know, it's end of January and you thought it was October. Yeah. All right. Process, we got ERDs. Anything else? Otherwise, I've gone through everything I had. So this is awesome, everybody. I had so much fun chatting it up with you all. And don't forget, next month is Melissa Shepard, CTA extraordinaire. Yeah.
Yes. Exciting.
So we have the event posted on Eventbrite. I have to put her information up. I just haven't gotten her bio yet. So I'm going to hassle her about that today so I can switch her name to being the like primary, but she'll be there. She's already confirmed. So
I had a question. You mentioned there's a chatter for this group.
Yes.
How do we get to that chatter?
Yeah, let me grab you that link. It's also on the Eventbrite is the website link. So let me just grab it though while I'm here on the Eventbrite. One of the many tabs to view it.
I got here a little late, but will all these links from the chat be available somewhere?
Oh, that is a great question. Great reminder for me too to kind of summarize that when I forgot to. Everything that we've gone through as our primary topics, as well as all the links in chat, are going to go into a slide deck, and they will be available linked into the chatter group, as well as linked on the YouTube recording.
Thank you.
And I just totally miscopied that. Let me copy the wrong link for you. That's the regular page, which, by the way, you can find all of our events at all the way up through December. We have them scheduled. I just was going through, we've got all them up until May that I think is showing, and then up to December we have them scheduled for. So we're about to put those on sale. Yeah, so if anybody has any events they want to come to, or again, call for speakers. If you have a topic you want to talk about, if you have something that you are passionate about, or you think you would love to share with the group, we would love to hear about it. So reach out, feel free to reach out to me, feel free to stay long on the line, and I will see what we can do. We'll get you hooked up and we'll set you up with a month to present. And I'd love to learn from more of you. And thank you for joining our first event of the year. Yeah.